This is Matt Miller, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Minus 7, 6, 5, 4.
We have main engine start. 2, 1.
Booster ignition and liftoff.
Countdown to launch. Fall TV 2010 on the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web. And by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide. Hello, my name's Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to episode number 1 of the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, for Monday, August 16th, 2010. A little bit about me. I'm a reality TV editor and produced writer located in Toronto, Canada. And you may know me from another podcast that I do, Chuck versus the Podcast for NBC's Chuck. It has been voted the number 1 TV-themed podcast in Podcast Alley's TV and film category continuously since December 2008. And in my experience with the podcast, I found that I just loved speaking to the writers and hearing their stories. I looked around for a podcast that was dedicated to TV writers and honestly couldn't find one. There were quite a few podcasts that were about features and about other types of writing, like novels, and a lot of them were just kind of a smorgasbord of all types of writing. But there was not one devoted to TV writers, despite the fact that there are roughly 10 times as many writers in television as there are in features. So I decided, let me start one. I was approached by Script Magazine, and they thought that the TV Writer Podcast idea was a great one and would be a really good fit for the podcasts that they already do on features. So that's how the partnership was born. And it's a great privilege to work with Script Magazine. They're honestly a great magazine and very well connected, and I think they're going to help the podcast to really, really do well. In today's inaugural episode, it's going to feature executive producer and showrunner of Human Target on Fox, Matt Miller. I had the privilege of speaking to Matt a few months ago when he was finishing up season 3 of Chuck. I've decided to start with that interview because he tells all about how he started in the Peter Stark producing program at USC, and then all of his experiences leading to actually creating his own show, and then going on to be staffed on Chuck. He talks about co-writing and a whole bunch of things that are relevant to the TV Writer Podcast. If you've already heard that interview and you want to skip ahead, it's just under 26 minutes long. Then later in the episode, we have my most recent interview with Matt, which is all about Human Target. Unfortunately, I found out at the last minute that he only had about 15 minutes to talk, so I wasn't able to ask a lot of fan questions. However, I'll be talking to more Human Target writers in the coming weeks, so I'll keep your questions handy. You can stick around for after the interviews, as I'll be telling you about some of the resources available and what to look forward to in the coming weeks. And now, I'm going to roll my first interview with Matt Miller in the beginning of April of this year, while he was still an executive producer and writer on Chuck. Enjoy. So I want to welcome writer Matt Miller to the podcast. How you doing, Matt?
I'm doing great, thank you.
I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and you're not only a writer, but you're an executive producer on the show, and you're a director as well.
That's true. I am a director, although I haven't directed any Chuck.
Mm.
We talked about directing one when we got the final 6 picked up this season, the extra 6, because we were really looking for directors, but it just didn't work out. I was really busy, and maybe next season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, let's take it back a little bit and talk a little bit more about your background. So,
sure.
You started out at USC?
I did. I went to. I didn't go to SC with Josh and Chris. Mm-hmm. But I did go to SC. I went to graduate school at SC.
What years were you at USC?
I was at USC, 93 to 95. Mm-hmm. And I was in a producing program there called the Peter Stark program, which is not necessarily geared towards writers. It's about 25 people a year, graduate students that are sort of motivated to be on the business end of the business. Mm-hmm. And then everyone there sort of just usually decides they would rather write. Mm-hmm. And so myself and a number of my classmates, I got a job when I graduated at prestigious Peter Stark program, as a waiter in a restaurant, and just started writing. So it was a good experience for me to do it, and I would recommend it, but, it doesn't always necessarily lead. It's not like you graduate the Stark program and you automatically sort of get a job in some end of the business.
it's a little interesting because I might have actually met you. I was accepted to SC grad school in '94, and I visited the campus, was getting everything set up, and I actually couldn't get the money together for the international fees. So I ended up staying in Toronto.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's super expensive, and I don't. I mean, the other graduate programs I think are a lot better. The Peter Stark program is a very good program. It's a very prestigious program, but it depends on what you want to do. If you want to write or something like that, you're probably, maybe better off just writing.
Mm-hmm. So in 1996, you had a short film, Understanding Olivia, and you were producer, director, and actor on that one.
That was part of Peter Stark. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was still in grad school at USC, and I was only that was what started off as a weekend goof with myself and a friend of mine. We just decided that would be the big Peter Stark project, and Peter Cohen was a producer on it, who was a classmate of mine at SC, and my friend was the other actor. It was real professional organization over there.
Those were the days.
Yeah, it was wonderful. That was
Yeah. So now on IMDb, it jumps a little bit, and it says that in '99 you were the creator of a series called Grown Ups. But what happened in between?
Well, '99 is probably when that show aired. Between '96 and '99, again, I finished up graduate school, and then I got a job as a waiter in a restaurant, and I was writing like a novel and a bunch of other stuff, and was able to get a break where a script that I had written, I was able to sell, and then I got a job to write a movie for Fox, which got me out of the restaurant. And so I was able to, write for a living. Now, when you look on IMDb, they only have the produced credits. They don't have everything that you end up doing, along the way. And I'm sure everyone has, jobs, and maybe it's a script that you sold, or a TV pilot that you did, or a, book that you were adapting, or whatever it is. But the only things that are published on that website are the things that they actually end up shooting and airing and putting on somewhere. So yeah, so I was working as a waiter, and then I sold this script and was able to get out of the restaurant. And then I was very, very fortunate and very naive, and was able to pitch a TV series with really no television experience,
wow,
credits or knowledge of any kind. And I pitched the show, and it was supposed to be a 1-hour kind of dramedy about my friends and I, called The Grown Ups.
Mm-hmm.
And the network bought it and seemed happy with it. And then they called me one day and said, we really like the script. We have a couple of small changes. And the first thing was, can you change it from a half hour to 1 hour?
Oh, my goodness.
And then they asked me to change it from single camera to multi-camera, which basically means a sitcom. And the last thing they said is, we have a piece of talent attached that we'd like you to sort of gear it towards. And I said, who do you have? And they told me that they had the artist formerly known as Urkel.
Okay.
Who was a gentleman named Julia White, a very nice young man. So that was my first foray into television. It was sort of, I don't know, it was like 27 or 28, maybe it was 29, somewhere in my late 20s, and I was running a television show knowing nothing about what I was doing.
Wow. Which
was a half-hour sitcom starring Julia White.
Wow.
We did that for a season, did 22 beautiful episodes of that.
Now, so that was sink or swim, and I guess you swam.
Yeah, exactly. My first hire.
I was a little interested. You worked with someone called Scott J. Rosenbaum on that one.
I did.
Is that the same Scott Rosenbaum that was on Chuck? That
is. Scott Rosenbaum was my roommate at the time.
Oh, you're kidding.
We both moved out here. Yeah, we moved out here together. We went to college together in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we moved out here together. And then when that show got picked up, I really had no idea what I was doing, and about 200 scripts arrived on my doorstep to hire writers to staff on the show. And so I turned to my roommate, Scott Skeeter, he goes by, and said, you want to work on the show? He said, sure. I said, you're hired. Start reading.
That's great.
And the two of us, with no experience, nothing to do, set out to hire the staff and put together that TV show. So yes, Skeeter Scott did work on that with me. That was our first time working together, or at least getting paid to.
Mm-hmm.
And then, years later, when Chuck came up, we started working together again.
That's great. Actually, he was on our most recent podcast.
Oh, perfect. There you go.
Yeah. Now, in between then and Chuck, you wrote and directed a romantic comedy, The Perfect You, is it Crazy Little Thing? I was a little confused by the
Crazy
title.
Little Thing was what someone, I don't know, one of the producers who sold it to whoever, they changed the title. I had nothing to do with that. But the title was Perfect You, and it was like $1 million independent movie that I wrote and directed. That was great. It was a blast, and I think you can get it on like Netflix. And it was a really wonderful experience. Did it in like 22 days or something like that in New York.
Great. And then you did a TV movie, Dynasty: The Making of a Guilty Pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. After the Perfect You, I had a meeting with ABC, and then I knew the producer was this guy named Greg Gugliotti, and so they wanted to do a kind of spoofy movie about the Dynasty. I had never really watched Dynasty growing up, or vaguely familiar with it. So I'd watched some episodes and sort of had this big lofty idea that we could do Dynasty as sort of a metaphor for greed in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
So the whole thing sort of took place at the beginning of 80 and spanned sort of the 9 years or 10 years of the decade. It was 9 years, I think, that the show was on for, and had this sort of lofty aspirations that we're going to do that. And that was also a really wonderful experience, worked with great people. We shot that actually in Australia for a few months. Mm-hmm. So that was great.
Was that at the same time as Las Vegas was happening, or did Las Vegas come after that?
No, I went on to Vegas sort of immediately after that.
And you were 2 or 3 years on Las Vegas?
That was 2 seasons on Las Vegas, as a producer and a writer on that. I had been writing, I'd written some pilots for NBC, that sort of brass at NBC. And again, as you know, on IMDb, it's just like the things that are actually shot, but there's a lot of jobs in between. And I'd written 2 pilots for NBC that fall, and for a variety of reasons, they didn't happen. But they had said, "Hey, would you come work on the show Las Vegas?" And I'd never staffed on a show before. And I sat down with a guy named Gary Scott Thompson, who created the show, and Gardner Stern, who was the executive producer there. And they were nice enough to hire me, and went on and did that for 2 years. Got to work with James Caan.
Great.
Yeah, it was incredible. He was an incredible guy.
And then came Chuck. So tell me about your introduction to Chuck. Had you seen the pilot, or what stage did you come on?
Yeah, I'd seen the pilot. I saw it in the editing room with Josh Schwartz. During this whole time, I've known Josh for many years. In fact, Josh was one of the few people telling me not to do the grown-up show when they turned it into the Jaleel White sitcom.
Okay.
And we were real good friends, and we've been very good friends for a while. And him and I actually are doing a pilot as well right now, a sitcom.
Mm-hmm. That's Hitched?
Hitched, exactly. But prior to that, we'd always been real good friends. And we talked about working together on a variety of things, and just nothing ever kind of worked out, or it was right, or for whatever reason. And so Chuck, seemed like a really good fit and a good thing for us to do. And so after they had shot the pilot, I went and screened it in the editing room. Thought it was just terrific. And so and then I had to meet Chris and met Mr. Fedak. Mm-hmm. And it was good. It was just all seemed like the right opportunity, the right time, and so we've had a blast doing it. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, and I'm just going to recap for the viewers. Of course, every writer's in the writer's room, but the scripts that you personally wrote were Chuck versus the Tango, Imported Hard Salami, The Seduction, The DeLorean, The Beefcake, The Colonel, which is a fan favorite, The Pink Slip, the first episode of the 3rd season, Nacho Sampler, and then most recently last week's episode, American Hero.
Yeah.
So definitely some great Chuck, and we don't have time to talk about all of those, but maybe what you can do is throughout the process you must have had either a favorite episode or a favorite moment. What kind of stories can you tell about the last couple of years? Maybe a scene that was cut that you loved, or just a taste from behind the scenes. Yeah,
well, it's first of all, it's a very collaborative medium. So we do sit in that writer's room all day, every day. And then different writers, and we break the story, and we really break it. Like every single beat is examined and discussed. And and then certain writers just go off and write them. But it's always a very different process, because there's the one thing when you get the idea and it's up on the board, and there's another phase when you write it, and then there's another phase when you shoot it, and there's another phase when you edit it, and so sometimes things come out better than you even thought they could, and sometimes you sit in the editing room and say, I feel like we sort of left a little on the table here, and that happens all the time, and it's a painful process where when you realize, or you think something wasn't fully realized. But then there's also the side where you sit in the editing room and you think, wow, this thing came out great, and that happens a lot too. So it was really great, and I don't know that there was. I think that, again, some of these episodes came out really, really well. I think that the DeLorean was maybe an episode that I thought we maybe left a little on the table on that one, in terms of what it could have been. I thought the Colonel came out really well.
Yeah,
I was really happy with that, and Peter Lauer, who directed. And every time a new director or a different director comes in, there's always a different feel that they give to the show. So I think when I sat in the editing room for Colonel, even though sometimes you sit in there and some scenes aren't working, but the material's there to shape them, and there was just so much epic storytelling that was happening in that episode in terms of Captain Awesome learning about Chuck, who at that time was now there's been other characters, but at the time it was the first person outside the immediate circle of Casey and Sarah to find out who it was, and there was a near hookup with Chuck and Sarah, and then Chuck needed to intersect out of his head. So there was a lot of things in favor for that episode. It had a lot of big epic moments, and just sort of always knew that thing was going to be big and cool and epic. And then there's like the DeLorean, a smaller story about Sarah's father coming, or I actually liked a lot the Seduction. I liked we all as a show and as a staff, and we all really loved the Roan Montgomery character.
Oh, yeah.
And he was someone that we had sort of had in mind for a while. And even, when we were picketing during the strike in between the first and second season, we'd be walking the strike line and talking about Roan Montgomery and how we wanted to get back in there and create him. And, and then and I think John Larroquette did a wonderful job, but you have a variety of ideas of who you want to play that part and how you want all that to turn out. But I do think that episode came out nicely. But, it's always a little different, the script to stage.
Well, and you have at least the privilege that your writing offices are literally on the same, like just down the hall from the editing suites, and you're just a few minutes walk away or on those golf carts to where they're shooting. I mean, I know there's some shows that shoot in one city and are written in a completely different city.
I'd be willing to bet our editors would like to be very far away from us. I'm sure they would prefer to be in Vancouver if at all possible. But, it's great for us because you can pop in there constantly. And we're always, even before, the edit's even been made, we're always sort of sniffing around the editing room asking the editors how to come out. And sometimes they're honest with you, and sometimes they lie because they don't want to because they know if they tell you it's not turning out so good. You always can fix it in the editing room. But even if, then you'll get particularly neurotic and you'll just keep pestering them all day with other questions. What doesn't work? What do we need to do? Do we need to reshoot anything?
Yeah. Well, and I love the pickup lines too. I know when I was there in September, I saw some early cuts, and it was funny to hear everybody's voices in the cuts. What I'm saying is like the editor's voice instead of Chuck and Sarah.
You realize, you need a line here, a line there, and you have them say it in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And then we'll get the real actors to come in during the looping process and put their own voices in. But for a while, you have whatever assistants standing in the hallway. You drag them in, and they have to say the words. Yeah, it's a fun process.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to American Hero. I mean, that was just aired last week, and of course you've written one or two since then.
Yeah. Let's see. American Hero was I wrote, again, with 12, I co-wrote that with Phil Klemmer and Max Denby. I actually did all my writing this season was in a co-variety.
Oh, all the writing, really?
Yeah, I had a very tough year, so I was, I had another kid, and I was writing 2 pilots and doing the show. So I co-wrote as much as was reasonable. Yeah. So I co-wrote the first one with Chris Vidak, and then I co-wrote the 6th one, which was the Nacho Sampler with Scott Rosenbaum. and then co-wrote 12 with Phil Klemmer and Max Denby, and Max is our writer's assistant.
Oh, okay.
So it was good for him to get his first produced credit where he got on that episode. And then he ended up co-writing another episode later for us in the season. And then I co-wrote episode 18, which is the second to last episode, with Ali Adler and Phil Klemmer.
Great.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the process then of co-writing. So when you co-wrote American Hero with Phil, did you trade off scenes, or did you pass drafts to each other, or
yeah,
how?
well, you do a little. I mean, it depends on the situation and the circumstances, how much time you have. I think usually what you end up doing, or what we do on the show, is you sort of divvy up the acts. You do it by acts. Someone will take the first three, someone will take the last three, or someone will take the first and the second and the fifth, and someone will take the second, third, and fourth. However you want to do it. You divvy up the acts and you both write them, and then you sort of pass your acts back and forth and allow the other person to give notes or give thoughts or do some writing on those acts as well.
Well, it's great that you guys have been working together for so long, because you have the tone, and you have. You would never know that you guys were writing different acts.
Right. You got to make sure everyone's nailing the voices, but by season 3, it's we've all been there since the first season, so it's not like hasn't been too many changes in the writing staff. So it's been a pretty tight group, and we all kind of have the same tone and voice for what we want the show to be. So it makes it easier, that process, where someone's not writing a completely different show.
Mm-hmm. And so originally episode 12 was supposed to be setting up the finale, which was going to be episode 13.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about number one, how that might be different than just the run-of-the-middle episode, setting up the finale, and then all of a sudden finding out that NBC was ordering another 6, and did you have to retool?
Yeah, it was a very big challenge, because we had designed the season around, blowing it out with 13, where 13 was sort of right off into the sunset kind of a moment, and then when they added new episodes, we were in the middle of 13 was just kind of coming off the board, so it had been sort of broken, and then to add 6 more is tough, because you don't want people to feel like, the season ended at 13, now what? Mm-hmm. So we ended up paring back some of the things we wanted to do in both 12 and 13.
Oh, I see.
So it didn't feel like such a climax. They still felt like big, important episodes, but it didn't necessarily feel like it was all over. All the stories had been tied up, and all the loose ends and all of that sort of stuff. So we had a bigger version of 12 and 13 that we wanted to do, that we had to pare down a little bit so it didn't feel like the season was over.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was a very strong episode. It was very well received by the fans. Great job on that one. Are there any stories in particular you can tell about that episode? Things that might have been a challenge, or things that were fun to do?
Yeah, well, it's always the stupid things that people hopefully won't tell when they watch it, but it's, a location that was difficult, or, something that didn't look as good as we wanted to, or we didn't have the pieces. The restaurant scene where Chuck interrupts Shaw's dinner with Sarah, and then you've got the guys in the van, and then you've got Morgan, and he makes the crank phone call, and then the police show up, and the ring shows up, and all of that kind of chaos. That was the hardest part of that episode to get right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it required, because there were so many pieces, and some of the pieces they weren't able to get, because this season we've been shooting the episode in 1 fewer days than we had last season.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult. So they just couldn't get all the pieces. So we were really struggling until the very last minute. We had to go in and shoot some extra stuff, some extra angles and things like that. So you had all the parts to make that sequence work.
Wow, well, it's really seamless on screen.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, that's the dream. The dream is that no one knows how hard you worked on it.
Yeah, well, and actually in particular, I noticed that this episode had a lot of location stuff. It was a lot less. I know Scott Rosenbaum, when he was on last week, he talked about how Chuck versus the Beard, he had a what do you call it, a bottle episode where he had to do almost everything on set. Yeah. This seemed like the opposite. Like there was a lot that was outside of the regular sets.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely true. In 12, because when it was originally conceived, it was supposed to be the second to last episode. I mean, there was a version of 12 at one time that took place in Paris.
Wow.
So yeah, so it was definitely a different take on it. But like like the restaurant that they had dinner in and that we threw or Awesome dove through the window and tackled Shaw and all that. That was on the lot. That was on the Warner Brothers lot. So even though it's not on our set, it was still on the Warner Brothers lot.
Okay.
But some of the other locations, like the warehouse and some of the ring stuff, was off the lot. So yes, that episode 309, the beard was what we call a bottle episode, which is once or twice a year. You end up having to do, and the idea is hopefully the audience wouldn't know that this is why it's happening. But for budget reasons, you have to shoot a whole episode just on your sets, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so we did the beard this year. Last year we did an episode where someone drove a car into the Buy More.
Oh, the Christmas one.
The Christmas episode, and if you notice, that mostly all takes place on our sets.
Yeah.
Because just the nature, you gotta eventually sort of catch up money-wise somewhere. I think season 1 we did an episode called The Marlin, where there was a break-in to Buy More.
Right.
So the Marlin and all of that. So you try and create storylines that could take place, in the Buy More or on your sets.
Well, the funny thing is, those are some of my favorite episodes.
Yeah, it's good. It because what happens with those episodes are, and the reason that they always come out very good is because they have to be about character. And because they can't be, it's not, we found the ring compound and we're infiltrating and, all of that stuff, which is important and necessary to moving the story forward. But I think the stuff that always resonates the best for audiences is when it comes back and it's just about the people and the characters, and you're learning new things about your characters and things like that.
Well, I should save money more often.
But exactly.
Yeah,
it's tough. You can't. They're very hard to break those episodes.
Yeah,
they take a lot of time in the writers' room on them because it's very tricky how to keep telling a story while you're just in one location or two locations.
Yeah, that's going to wrap up the Chuck part.
Great.
But your work on Hitched is done, or are you still continue to work on that?
No, we're not. We haven't even shot it yet. So
okay.
We're just about to start that. We've written the script, and we're in the casting process now, and we're pretty much all cast. Just one or two very small, one role that needs to be cast, and then a couple of real small roles. But one of the sort of main ensemble we're still casting, and then we start on Monday with what they call the table read, and then we sort of rehearse it all week next week, and then we shoot it the following week.
Great. And so now, is that something that's planned to go into series, or is that just a TV movie, or how does that work?
Well, the way they do pilots is they shoot some pilots, and then they basically decide what they're going to air when their pilots have come in, and they decide which of their old shows aren't going to be returning, which ones are going to be returning, how many slots they have, what programs fit well with those. So we won't know if it's going to be on in the fall until like mid-May. So it's for CBS, is the network.
Yeah.
And it's a sitcom, and it's in the vein of How I Met Your Mother, which is a good, successful show for them. So
okay.
Sort of like that, and we'll see. We'll have to see how it comes out.
Yeah. So, and what are your plans for after that?
After that, some sleep, a lot of sleep, and then I'll have to see if Hitched gets picked up. Then I'll be working on that, possibly returning for Chuck for a 4th season or something different.
Wow.
We don't know. Future is uncertain.
Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a couple of young kids. And,
no, it's okay. Thank you for doing it. I appreciate it. It was, if we can get any publicity we can get for the show right now, it would be great.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you
listen,
for...
I appreciate it. I thank you so much.
Yeah, and thanks for giving us a great thing to do on Monday nights.
Oh, beautiful. Terrific.
Yeah.
Keep watching.
Okay, so best of luck to you.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we're back. This next interview was taped this week with Matt Miller, and it's all about Human Target, which airs on Fox on October 1st, and I think you'd do well to check it out. Enjoy. So this is Gray Jones, and I'm here with Matt Miller, executive producer and showrunner of Human Target on Fox. How you doing, Matt?
I'm great, Gray. How are you?
Doing great, thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man now.
That's okay. Yeah, my pleasure.
We'll get to season 2 of Human Target in a bit, but first, I'd love to pick it up where we left off in our last interview. If you remember, when we spoke last, you were finishing work on the Hitched pilot, and you had no idea if Chuck was going to be renewed. And when was it that Human Target came calling?
I basically had just finished work on the pilot that I had co-written and co-produced with Chuck's Josh Schwartz. And so we had finished that, handed it in, and was sort of just leaving the lot and got a phone call from Peter Roth, the president of Warner Brothers, to come into his office immediately. And that's when we sort of started talking about Human Target.
Mm-hmm. And what were your first impressions?
Well, I hadn't seen the show, so I was able to watch, had to go home immediately. They were in a bit of a time crunch because they needed someone to sort of come on board and run the show and pitch Fox on the take and all that. And they only had a few days to do it because the upfronts were coming up. So I sort of ran home and had to plow through 12 episodes and then come up with a take. And so it happened very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so did you have to pitch them on already on what you were thinking needed to be changed, or did you have a little bit of time to deal with it?
Well, no, I had to figure that out. So I had to come up with on what my version or my take would be on the show, pitch that to Warner Brothers, pitch it to Fox, and then get them to like it at least enough that they picked it up for season 2.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are.
I already know a little bit about the changes that you're planning. You mentioned them at Comic-Con, and
yeah.
I totally agree. I know my first impressions. I watched all the shows in a row, and I was really impressed. I thought great action, very, very strong cast, and the character interplay is excellent. I mean, Chi McBride, Mark Valley, Jackie Earle Haley.
They're great together.
Oh, what a team.
Yeah.
And funny. I mean, you throw Chi McBride in a room, it's going to be funny. But at the same time, I was feeling just a little claustrophobic at times. Not just in the interior locations, but just in the fact that it was very male centric.
Yes.
And so, was that also your impression of it?
Yeah, it was. It was a very male show, and obviously wonderful banter between the guys, but felt like it needed some females. Felt like it needed to open up a little bit, both in terms of the cast and the storytelling, as well as visually. So we're visiting different countries this year, and just giving it a little bit more pop and a little bit more wish fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. So tell me briefly about the new female characters.
Well, there's two. The first is named Ilsa Pucci, and she is a mid-30s, a widowed wife of a billionaire, and her husband was killed under mysterious circumstances. So she hires our team in the first episode back to help her out, and ends up by the end of that episode kind of buying the team and becomes our sort of female Charlie.
Yeah.
And so, not only does Chance now have to deal with a boss, but he also has, access to her, her wealth, her pocketbook, her private planes, her entire access.
Uh-huh. Oh, I can just imagine it's going to be a great mix.
Yeah.
I mean, Chi McBride having a female boss.
Yeah, it's great.
Gotta be friction.
It's great.
Yeah. So now you've said that you also want to relate it to character more. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, well, just basically to flesh out the characters in a way so that some of the episodes aren't just about saving a guest star of the week, but that our characters themselves are a little bit more emotionally involved or connected to the cases that we're working on.
Mm-hmm. And so I know a lot of the fans have been a little bit nervous about the new female characters coming in, because what they really felt was the strongest part of the first season was that trio.
Yeah. Well, the trio I think it actually enhances the trio because it gives them more to play and more to sort of complain about, and in no way does it minimize, but I think it actually helps that initial core trio of those guys.
Mm-hmm. And that's not the only thing that's changing. I know I keep in touch with Chuck composer Tim Jones, and he told me actually a few months back when you had approached him to do the music for Human Target. Can you talk about this change?
Yeah, well, another one of the things that we're doing is we're adding some sort of needle drops to the show this season, where it was all orchestration last year, and for financial and a variety of other reasons, we've decided to go away from that, and so we're going to have some needle drops, and Tim's has come in to help us out a bit with the score itself and giving it a little bit more pace and energy.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bear McCreary was the previous composer.
That's correct.
I understand that Tim is going to follow a lot of the same directions to make sure there's a consistency, but just take it a little further.
Yes. I think that's the idea.
Mm-hmm. And one question that a lot of fans had was these needle drops, the songs. How do you see? Like, I guess people have expressed that they're afraid the songs are going to turn it into the OC or something. Like, how do you see the songs coming in?
Yeah, I don't think we would really be turning it in. We're talking about one or two an episode to just add a little bit more contemporary fun to it. I think that for those people that are concerned or curious about it, I think all we can say is you'll have to wait and see the episodes, and hope that you like them.
Yeah. Well, I definitely can't wait. And it's October 1st?
October 1st is our premiere date.
Yeah, and why was that changed? Just scheduling? Or?
Actually, I don't even know. Mm-hmm. To be honest with you, I'm not sure. Some things that are beyond my control, I'm perfectly happy with it. I guess it gives us another week to get everything ready, but I actually don't even know.
Mm-hmm. So you're moving to Friday nights. You're becoming more character-driven. You're adding female characters. Obviously, you want to open up this show to a new audience. How do you balance that? Making sure that number one, you had a cliffhanger at the end of first season, so you've got to pick up where that story left off, and then you've got a whole new direction that you're taking the show. Is that a tough balance?
Yeah, it is. It was very difficult for a while. I think we're hopefully in a rhythm now that seems to be working pretty nicely. But it was a lot of balls in the air, and the idea has to be and has always been to create a version of the show that feels in keeping with everything that the fans liked last year. Mm-hmm. But also be able to turn on some new audience members. So it's a delicate balancing act, and I think we're delivering a fun, action-packed show that will feel faithful to last season.
Mm-hmm. And what can you tell me about things that you've brought from Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, I actually got to tell you, and I think the action on Chuck was incredible, but the things that they have been able to achieve on Human Target, I think even surpasses that. Mm-hmm. And they have a great crew up there in Vancouver. Not that Chuck's crew isn't fabulous as well, but they have a great crew. The producer-director is a guy named Steve Boyum, who comes from like a stunt background and just truly understands action in a very deep way. So that part of Human Target has been fun to just sort of play with all of their toys that they have. But I did like this sort of buddy comedy kind of bantery version of Chuck, and certainly some of that was already in Human Target and will continue to be. Chuck is a lighter and more comedic show than Human Target is, but there's still like some lessons to be learned from both the action, levity, and the relationships.
Yeah. Now, I understand that the previous showrunner, John Steinberg, is still part of the writing staff.
That's correct.
Is that challenging, or talk about that change?
Well, there's a couple. Well, I mean, the thing is that John is an incredibly talented, smart, and invaluable member of the staff, in a sense that he just knows these characters as well as or better than anyone, and writes the show so well and has such a great head for action and for storytelling. So we've been very, very, very lucky that he stayed on with the show and is helping us as much as he is. Yeah. And he's everything about sort of the changing of the guard in terms of the responsibilities that he has last year versus what he's doing this year. He's just and for me illuminates what a great guy he is and his character that he's been able to transition so well.
Absolutely. Now that is a little bit of what happens when you're producing a show. Even as a senior writer on Chuck, you would often lead the room, right?
Yes.
Giving notes to each other, and
that was definitely one of the things I would do on Chuck. Yes.
Yeah. And so tell me about the rest of the writers on the show. Just briefly.
The writers on Human Target?
Yeah.
Well, I brought over one writer from Chuck named Zev Barrow, who's enormously talented. And then we also have on the show, from last year, there's John. Also returning from last year is Brad Kern. And also returning from last year is a great writer named Robert Levine.
Great.
And new writers that we have on the show, besides Zev Barrow from Chuck, are Andrea Newman, a writer named Dan McDermott, who wrote the movie Eagle Eye.
Oh, great.
David Simpkins, who's written and created a number of shows, including Warehouse 13. Lila and Nora Zuckerman, who came over from Fringe last year. I'm trying not to leave anyone out. A new writer we just hired named Dan Fessman, very talented guy, worked on NCIS for a long time. And, it's a super talented, great staff. And we're very lucky.
13 episodes again?
It's 13 episodes, but certainly with the possibility of more if everything goes well.
Great. So I know we don't have much time left. Let me jump ahead a little bit to
Sure.
This is the TV Writer Podcast for Script Magazine, and so there's some questions that writers always have, especially beginning writers and people who are trying to break in. When you're hiring writers, do you prefer reading specs or do you prefer reading original material?
You mean like specs of television shows versus reading original?
Yeah.
For me, I like reading original material. It's easier to sort of understand how a writer writes and their voice and the way that they think because they're having to build the whole thing from scratch as opposed to characters that have already been built for them and things like that. So for my personal preference, I like original material.
And for your own process, I know you've been doing this for quite a while now, but what is your favorite book or a book that you can recommend to somebody who's trying to break in?
A book to read about the business?
About the business or about writing, something that you found helpful to you?
Well, there's a book, there's just entertaining books like, Adventures in the Screen Trade, William Goldman. But also, the Joseph Campbell books are incredibly useful just in terms of, storytelling and learning about, just the art of story. And obviously Robert McKee's books are pretty popular.
And what would your advice be to a writer who is trying to break in?
Keep writing. There's no better training than writing, and read as much as you can. It depends on where you live. If you live in Los Angeles, then, any job that you can get working as a reader where you're reading script after script after script after script is going to help you with your own writing, but also as much as you can possibly write, write and work on it and shape it. And, writing is rewriting. So keep working on it, keep figuring it out. Don't just abandon the idea immediately. Work on it until you feel you've written all you can write on that story, and then turn your attention to something else. But discipline and productivity. It's very, very easy to write once a week or twice a week. You really got to do it as much as you can, 5 days a week, 7 days a week.
Great. Well, I know that I can't wait to see Human Target. I love actually following writers, and as soon as I found out that you were going to Human Target, I got the season 1, and me and my wife watched it together and just loved it. So we can't wait for season 2.
Oh, great. All right, beautiful. Well, I'm thrilled that you'll watch it, and let me know what you think.
Yeah, I certainly will.
Okay, fabulous.
Well, I know you didn't have a lot of time, but I think we covered everything we needed to cover. So
beautiful. Well, thanks, Gray. Thanks for doing it. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And we're back. If you haven't watched Human Target, I really, really urge you to, especially if you're into action. It's a great show, dynamic characters, great comedy, and I really look forward to seeing what Matt Miller's going to bring to it in season 2. I honestly had the exact same feelings about season 1. Great show, but really in need of some stronger female characters, and I think it's going to be a great dynamic. I really look forward to seeing what he brings to the table. So set your calendar, Human Target, Friday, October 1st on Fox at 8 p.m. And as we close out, I wanted to tell you about some of the resources that are available. First of all, I want to tell you about the website, tvwriterpodcast.com. I urge you to go visit and see what's there. There's a lot more detail about me, about the podcast, about the interviewees. There's a really important thing, which is a request list. If you would like to request a writer from your favorite TV show, you can request it there. First, check the list that's on the site. Make sure that it's not already on the list, and then absolutely post your request, and I will do my best to get to your show. There's also an ever-expanding list of helpful writing links. You can send your suggestions to mail@tvwriterpodcast.com. They're categorized in a number of different categories, and my hope for that list is that it's going to be a springboard for all of the resources out there that'll be helpful to you in your writing. There's also, if you notice, a support page. We do need support on the podcast. If you are interested in sponsorship, if you have a business or product that relates to writing, we'd love to advertise it here and on the site. Donations are always welcome. There's a handy Amazon mini store with some featured writing books that you may not have thought of, that if you click on them and order there, it gives a little kickback to us. And as well, if you want to just browse the entire Amazon store, there's a link that you can do that, where any purchase that you make in any category at Amazon.com, there's a little percentage that will come back to help support the podcast. Also, even though you can access the podcast through iTunes, if you have a choice and you're watching it on your computer anyway, it's helpful if you can watch it in a web browser. There's a number of ways you can do that. You can watch it at scriptmag.com, you can watch it at tvwriterpodcast.com, or you can watch it at tvwriterpodcast.blip.tv. And there's an extra little feature with that one, and that's that if you want to embed it on your own blog, there's code there that you can actually embed it on your own blog or website. And we'd love for you to do that. Anytime anybody watches in a web browser for free, it gives us a little kickback because there's little ads that pop up. So if you do that and you don't have any cash to give, you can support us in that way. Also, if you're on Facebook, you can come visit the TV Writer Podcast Facebook page. There's a little link on the bottom right of the website to help you get there. I urge you to do that. There's some discussions that go on there. If you also requests and if you want to discuss podcasts, you can do it there or on the website. Also, I do invite you to check out scriptmag.com. They've recently completely overhauled their website, and I think you're going to like it. Also, their digital subscriptions are an incredible value. For only $12.95, you not only get a year's access to the digital magazine, but you actually get over 6 years of back issues for free. I don't know of any other screenwriting magazine that offers that. You can even save them as PDF files and read them later when you're offline. Just tremendous, incredible value. So please check that out. The next few weeks are going to be busy. We'll be featuring our Countdown to Launch promotion, bringing you behind the scenes of many fall TV shows before they launch or return for the new seasons. You can get more details on Countdown to Launch and what's in the pipe at tvwriterpodcast.com. You can follow me on Twitter, @GrayJones is my handle, or you can send an email to mail@tvwriterpodcast.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and scriptmag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide.